Friday, I want to begin talking about one of my favorite murder novels. Just thought, why not? It's Good Friday, might as well, right? In Murder on the Orient Express, any fans? One of the greatest whodunit mysteries ever written, Agatha Christie gives a mind-blowing ending. Spoiler alert, if you haven't read the book, you're about to find out how it ends. And I'm not even sorry about that. You've had 90 years to read the book. You should have probably read it by now. You're going to find out who the killer is. As the story goes, the greatest detective in the world, Hercule Poirot, tries to figure out who killed Mr. Ratchet, who was found dead in his sleeping compartment with 12 stab wounds in his body. Now, since the murder happened on the train, only someone on the train could have been the murderer. It had to be one of the 12 passengers that were there. Nobody could have gotten off. Nobody could have gotten on. Was it the doctor? Was it the countess and her husband? Was it the aristocrat, the diplomat, the colonel, the missionary, the maid? Who was it? And by the end of the book, here's what you find out. It was all of them. All of them. Hercule Poirot's looking for one murder, and he finds 12. Everybody on the train did the murder. Everyone on the train had stabbed this man. 12 stab wounds for 12 killers. Now tonight we get to look at a murder mystery that has a very similar ending. Every Good Friday, the cross stands like a big chalk outline at a crime scene, reminding us that a murder has been committed. Have you ever thought about that on Good Friday? We get to remember that a murder has been committed. A man named Jesus was killed in the most horrific way, and his murder was so scandalous, so nasty, so atrocious, so unjust that 2,000 years later, we are still talking about it. Now here's the question. Who killed him? Some say it was the Romans. The Romans had no problem crucifying Jews, especially a man from Nazareth who allowed people to call him Kyrios, Lord, something that only Caesar was called, right? So the Romans had no problem crucifying a man like that. For them, killing Jesus was just another Friday, just another Friday. Some suggest it was the Jewish leaders. They certainly had motives. Jesus kicked up the hornet's nest when he looked at the Pharisees and called them a bunch of hypocritical, whitewashed tombs who followed their father, the devil. Now, they certainly had motive for why to kill him, right? They could have been the ones to kill him. Or maybe it was Herod Antipas, right? Now, yes, Herod didn't actually condemn Jesus to the cross, but yeah, he didn't help him either, right? In fact, he kind of mocked him in front of people, didn't help spare his life. He could have set him free, but he didn't do that. Instead, he just let the Romans take care of another nasty Jewish prophet that threatened his throne. So who was it? Who murdered Jesus, the Son of God? Was it the Romans? Was it Pilate? Was it the Jews? The Pharisees? The Bible's answer to that question, who killed the Son of God, is this. You did. You did. You probably didn't come to Good Friday thinking you'd be accused of murder. And yet, here we are. You're officially accused of murder. The reality is that when we look at the murder that happened at Golgotha, we find your and my fingerprints all over the crime scene. We all killed Jesus. We're all on the same train. We all held the knife. Jesus died because of us. It's probably not the message you'd want to hear, but it's the message you need to hear. Why? It's simply because of this. Your healing begins when you own that your hand held the hammer. I mean, that's just what we're honing in tonight. You cannot have healing. You cannot have forgiveness. You cannot have restoration until you realize that truth. Healing begins when you, not just your neighbor, but you own the fact, own the truth, own the guilt that your hand held the hammer. You and I murdered the Son of God. And owning that truth is the first step to owning the good news. You might be thinking, now hold on, I wasn't even there. I wasn't even born yet. How can you say that I killed Jesus? Now again, you might not have physically driven the nails, but the Bible insists we all, every single one of us in this room, in a very real way, played a huge part in his death. And that's really hard to hear. I get it. But don't turn away just yet, because this heavy truth is not given tonight to crush you. It's not given tonight to condemn you. It's given tonight to drive you to the cross where you can find healing from the one you pierced, from the one whose arms are open, and because of whom a fountain has been opened up for your forgiveness. Now, to help us see our part in the death of Jesus, we're going to focus on two verses tonight. Zechariah chapter 12, verse 10, and then chapter 13, verse 1. If you don't know where Zechariah is, it comes just before Malachi, the last book in the Old Testament. So find Matthew, find Malachi, and then you can find Zechariah. The Old Testament is filled with beautiful pictures and promises that give us a preview of the kind of salvation that would be accomplished when the Messiah, the King, the promised King that God was going to give, when he would come and work out God's redemptive plan. And Zechariah in particular is chocked full of these pictures and promises. I mean, in no other little minor prophet do you find this amount of promises about a Messiah. It's amazing. It was written 570 years before Jesus' death. 570 years before Jesus died, Zechariah looks ahead to the days of restoration when God would make all the wrongs right, and when he would bring about a new creation, and when he would make everything as it should be. But with that restoration would come a mass recognition that someone had died to make that restoration possible. Someone had died to make that restoration possible. Zechariah chapter 12 and chapter 13 are like the movie trailer that gives us a preview of the future kingdom. So when we read it, we just we're putting ourselves 570 years before the cross, and we're trying to think about what Zechariah is talking about here. And here's what God promises through his prophet Zechariah. The Lord speaking through his prophet says this: "And I will pour out on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of grace and pleas for mercy, so that when they look on me, on him whom they have pierced, they shall mourn for him as one mourns for an only child, and weep bitterly over him as one weeps over a firstborn." Chapter 13, verse 1. "On that day there shall be a fountain opened up for the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, to cleanse them from sin and uncleanness." Now, this is in that section of restoration. When Zechariah thinks about the best days in history, what comes to mind? When Zechariah thinks about the happiest day in all the universe, in all time, the day that restoration is finally accomplished, what does he see in this happiest of days? A bunch of sad people. A bunch of sad people. That's weird, isn't it? Why is everybody sad? They're sad because they've realized they've killed someone very important. Sounds a bit ironic, doesn't it? The happiest day coming on the heels of sadness, the day of restoration coming with huge remorse, the most intense remorse ever seen. God pouring out his grace, and the result is people seeing their guilt, seeing the part they played, grieving, mourning, and then being forgiven. What in the world does Zechariah have in mind? Zechariah's prophecy might seem muddy to you, but it's actually a perfect passage for a Good Friday sermon like the one tonight. It paints an amazing picture of the gospel, and it sets the agenda for what we're doing here tonight on Good Friday. It just lays it out on what we're here to do. Our being here, celebrating Good Friday, mourning Good Friday, having a happy sadness about Good Friday, fulfills what Zechariah saw 570 years before Jesus died. Tonight, we are the living embodiment of Zechariah chapter 12, verse 10. That's what we're doing tonight. But to see how we're fulfilling that prophecy, we're going to have to put ourselves on trial. So it's going to get a little awkward tonight. We're all going to have to take the stand as criminals, because before we can bask in the good news, we have to own up to the bad news. Now, for those of you that are careful Bible readers and you were kind of paying attention when that text was being read, you might be saying, okay, well, wait a second. He's writing to the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. He was prophesying to the Jews. So this speaks to the Jews. So we're off the hook, right? Wrong. Because although Zechariah originally spoke specifically to Israel, what he writes in this little passage applies to us. If you call yourself God's people, then this prophecy and everything in it applies to your life tonight. You don't have to be in the house of David. You don't have to have an apartment in Jerusalem for this to apply to you. It applies to you, which means you should feel every bit of the weight of conviction from this passage, and also every bit of its amazing, glorious grace. Heavy conviction, amazing grace. Here's the first bit of bad news. You've murdered someone. You've murdered someone. Zechariah says that when God pours out his grace on his people, they open their eyes and they see him whom they have pierced. Now, the word pierced in this verse isn't describing some Gen Z emotional wound, right? Where it's like, oh, you pierced me. You really triggered me and hurt me. That's not what it's talking about. It's not as if we've broken someone's heart. It isn't a minor flesh wound like piercing someone's ear. The word in other verses literally means to run someone through, to stab someone, to gut them, like with a spear. Now, one of the things my wife can tell you about me is I'm a whodunit junkie, right? It's probably weird, especially if this is, it's been a while for you to come to a church and hear a pastor. It's probably weird for you to hear a pastor admit that one of his favorite things to do in pastime is to just watch a good murder. Just watch a good crime show, right? And read a good crime novel. But the thing about crime shows and the thing about murder mysteries is that the more you pick them up, the more you learn about criminal psychology along the way. And here's the thing. How a victim was killed is a huge giveaway to who did it and all the emotions the murderer was feeling when they killed their victim, right? So when you're reading your crime novel, when you're watching a murder mystery, and you find out that the victim's been shot, anybody can shoot anybody, right? In the show. I'm not saying in real life. I hope you can't shoot anybody. But in the show, anybody can shoot anybody. It's still a free-for-all. Who did it? We don't know. It was too distant. There's not any kind of personal connection. But when you find out the victim's been stabbed, you know the murder was personal and emotionally charged. Just a tip-off on murder mysteries. When that happens, oftentimes detectives start looking at the spouse, okay? Because that tells them that this was somebody intimately close, someone that had some kind of intimate emotional connection. Psychologically speaking, do you know how much rage and hatred it takes to stab someone? Just stabbing is a crime of passion. Running someone through is motivated by terrible anger. And the person who's stabbing wants to inflict as much personal pain as possible. That's the kind of murder Zechariah describes in this prophecy. We have run a man through. We have gutted him. It's not just a killing, it's brutality. When God's grace opens his people's eyes, we look up and realize what we've done. We've murdered someone. And it's awful. We've all stabbed him. We've all held the knife. But here's the question. Who have we murdered? Who is it that we've murdered? Now, that's the second piece of bad news. You've murdered God. You've murdered someone is bad enough news, gut-wrenching news. But you've not just murdered anybody. You've murdered God. It's a weird thing to say because we can't really kill God, can we? He is, after all, God. He is immortal, incorruptible, eternal. We don't really think of killing God. Those words don't necessarily go together. Can you actually kill God? Is that even a possibility? And yet, that's the words Zechariah chapter 12, verse 10 give us. And I will pour out on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of grace and pleas of mercy, so that when they look on me, on him whom they have pierced. Now, who's the me in this verse? Who's been pierced? In context, it's the Lord, God himself. God says people have pierced him, literally run him through. And how have they managed to do this? By killing a man, a him. So they've pierced me, God. How? By piercing him, whoever him is. Hundreds of years before Jesus came, Zechariah saw the execution of a man and connected it with piercing God himself. Someone would be murdered in Jerusalem, and in his murder, humanity would do to him what they always wanted to do to God. I can't imagine what the original audience must have thought when they heard that one day they will look on God, look to God, and in looking to God, they would see the man they killed. But from this side of history, we know exactly who Zechariah is describing, don't we? We know exactly who Zechariah is describing. As he looks ahead, who does he see? He sees a murdered Messiah. He sees a slain Savior. He sees a crucified Christ. And Zechariah points to him and says, look at God. Look at the man you've murdered. That's what Zechariah is doing here in chapter 12. Zechariah saw Good Friday 570 years before it happened. He talks about the cross and points to the God and the man, the God-man, whom sinners have killed, whom sinners have brutally murdered. Now, hold on. Just hold the phone for a second. How do we get looped into this crime? Right? Again, we weren't even there. Well, I think you find if you were just to take a cross-reference Bible and find all the places that Zechariah 12 shows up, every time Zechariah is even alluded to, you begin to see how the Bible spans it out, not just to a few people living in Jerusalem, but to the whole world. To the whole world. John points it out in John chapter 19, verse 37, when a Roman stabs Jesus with a spear. And then Peter stands up to speak to thousands of people from all over the Mediterranean, many of whom might not have even been there when Jesus died, and says, you crucified and you killed him. That's in Acts chapter 2. By the time we get to Revelation chapter 1, verse 7, here's what it says. Every eye will see him. In other words, everyone will look, and all the tribes of the earth will wail as if they personally killed him. So spanning out to the rest of the Bible, you see it's not just one group of people who killed Jesus. It wasn't just the Romans or just the Jewish leaders. It was all of us. All of us. Right here in this room tonight. It was all of us. Here's the reality Good Friday gives you. Here's the reality Zechariah 12 gives you. We're all Christ killers. We're all Christ killers. Can you just let that truth sink in for a minute? Like just, again, this is hard truth, I know it, and I know it's prickly, and I know it's hard. We're going to get to the good news and the grace and the sweetness of it here in a minute, but can you just own that title on yourself? That I am a Christ killer. I killed the Christ. It's a heavy accusation, isn't it? Maybe even a hurtful accusation. And yet it's absolutely true. I'm a Christ killer. Accepting the truth that we're Christ killers comes with understanding what sin is and what it cost the Savior to buy our forgiveness. Sin is an absolute rejection of God. The old Puritans used to call it deicidium, meaning God murder, because in their minds, what sin is doing is sin is wishing God wasn't even in our life. Sin is wishing God were dead when it comes to us. We could have our own way then. We wouldn't have to worry about some messy God who keeps stepping into our business. If he were dead and out of the way, then we could just do and have what we want. And that was deicidium, God murder. It's one of the reasons why R.C. Sproul used to speak of every sin as a cosmic act of treason. Now here's the problem. When you reject the God of life through sin, the result is death. Our sin is the reason we've been separated from God. It's the reason why we die. But God, being rich in mercy, offers a way for us to not die, offers a way for us to be reconciled, to be brought back, to be brought near. But God can't just forgive and forget, can he? He can't just sweep sin under the rug. Otherwise, he's not a just God. Do you know what a good God does? A good God is a just God. And because a good God is a just God, and God is a just God, then you know what he must do? He must judge sin. It has to happen. There's no other way for God to be a just God but for him to judge sin. And yet, being the gracious God that he is, he found a way. He planned a way to judge sin without judging the Christ killers. He found a way, and it was by incorporating the Christ killers into his plan. It was because of their sin that someone innocent, someone qualified to die would have to die as a sacrifice for the sinners. And the only person all in the universe that was qualified to do that is the Son of God himself. No one else could do that. You couldn't die for the sins of your neighbor can't die for the sins that you've committed. Only someone completely sinless and only God himself in the flesh could die for your sins. And so, not only was our sin the cause of our separation from God, but our sin was the reason Jesus had to die. Jesus died because of us. Had we not sinned, there would be absolutely no need for the cross. So you might not have been with Judas when he betrayed Jesus. You might not have been with the Pharisees when they accused him. You might not have been with Pilate when he washed his hands and condemned him, or with the Romans when they nailed him to the cross. But your guilt is a guilt of a different kind. It's a guilt by association. You're guilty by association. Association with what? Association with sin. Association with the fact that you are a rebel. Sin killed Jesus. And guess what? We're sinners. We're sinners. As sinners, we have become accomplices together in the greatest, most atrocious murder in history, the murder of God incarnate. We have run him through. And we have to own this truth if the gospel's to be sweet. An old theologian once said, Christ is never sweet till sin is felt to be bitter. Do you feel the weightiness and the bitterness of your God murder tonight? Because only then does the fact that you've murdered, the fact that my sin held the hammer, the fact that Jesus was nailed to the cross because of what I had done, the fact that my rebellion put the spear in the soldier's hand and then pierced his heart, the fact that in my sin I killed Jesus Christ. And so did you. Ownership of the murder leads to mercy. There we have it. We found the murderer, you and me, and we found the murder weapon, our sin. We know who held the hammer. We know who nailed Jesus to the cross. Now what? Zechariah says God's people will experience his grace when they look on me, on him whom they have pierced. God doesn't say when they look at me. So we're not here tonight for just a fleeting glimpse, for a glance. We're here for gaze, right? We're for gazing upon the cross. That's why we're here. The difference between glimpsing and gazing is infinitely important. We're not just here to look at the cross. We're here to look on the one we've pierced, which implies faith. We don't just look at the crucified man. We gaze at him. And the longer we gaze at the cross, the more we see how terrible our sin really is, and the conviction gets heavy, and the grace gets sweet. Zechariah says, they shall mourn for him as one mourns for an only child, and weep bitterly over him as one weeps over a firstborn son. Now that's powerful imagery. It's huge gut punch to think about losing your only son. Now let's just take it a step further to what Zechariah is actually saying. Losing your only son because you killed him. That's a grief almost too deep for words. That kind of realization. And that's exactly the kind of sorrow that Zechariah is laying at our feet here. And not only is it a deep sorrow and a heavy sorrow, it's a sorrow that's personally felt by every individual. We collectively have guilt. We have pierced the Messiah. But then there's also individual ownership. I have pierced the Messiah. And it doesn't matter what your rank is, whether you're the king or the priest. If you're in David's house or Levi's house, you mourn. If you're the father or the son, if you're David or Nathan, it doesn't matter. If you're a man or a woman, the husbands or the wives, if you're by yourself or with a group of people, everybody mourns. Why? Because we all have reason to. Now, a lot of Christians struggle to know how to feel about a Good Friday. Good Friday is kind of one of those weird things that churches do that nobody really knows how they're supposed to come in. I've been a pastor for a little while, and every time we do a Good Friday service, somebody asks me, what are we supposed to do? Like, yes, Good Friday's sad, but Sunday's coming, and I know that Jesus is alive. Am I supposed to go and pretend? Like, am I supposed to pretend to be somber? Am I supposed to pretend to be sad? Am I supposed to act like there's a funeral? Can I just tell you something here? Ezekiel chapter 12 answers this by putting forward one question. Who said we're pretending? Who said we're pretending? We're not pretending to be sad. We're actually sad. We're not pretending to mourn. We're not manufacturing some kind of emotion because it's a holiday. And this is the emotion that you're supposed to feel with this holiday. No, we're thinking slowly about the gospel. Oftentimes, our gospel thoughts are just too fast. It was sin. Sin brings death. Jesus died for sin. 3 days later, Jesus rose again. But on Good Friday, we stop and we linger over that second part. The wages of sin is death. And a man had to die, and not just any man, but God incarnate. And we think about what it took. Do you know what your and my little gossip sessions cost? Your and my little angry tirades? Our little pride? You know what they cost? Well, it cost the Son of God his life. The Son of God is life. Spurgeon couldn't get over this fact. He said, sin must be exceedingly sinful, for it killed the Lord of glory. It was not the spear, not the nails, not the crown of thorns that truly killed Christ. It was our sin laid upon him. That's what killed Christ. So on Good Friday, we're given a chance to really think deeply about the cost of sin. And then we get to personalize it, and it wasn't just the cost of sin ambiguously, it was the cost of my sin. My sin. It was the cost of your sin. You've heard the bad news. We've murdered the Messiah, and we mourn the fact. It was our sin that pierced him, ran him through, and killed him. It cost his life. But then Zechariah takes a sweet turn in chapter 13, and he tells us what's come of it. He says in verse 1 of 13, on that day there shall be a fountain opened up for the house of David, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, to cleanse themselves from sin and uncleanness. How amazing is that? You and I sin, you and I together collaboratively kill the Messiah, and yet through his death a fountain opens up. And what happens with this fountain? Well, all the sins that put him there on the cross get washed away. You stab him, and his blood floods away the knife. Isn't that amazing? This is the amazing side, the amazing mystery of the gospel. The wages of sin is death. I deserve to die. A man took my death, and by taking my death, he gave me life and washed me clean. I killed him. He healed me. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for your, for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds that came from the knife in our hand, we're healed. We're healed. Isn't that amazing? From murder to mercy. From gore to grace. Irony of ironies, and that's the fountain that's open to you tonight. If you're already a believer and you've already had that fountain opened up for you, it's just time to rebathe and enjoy the fountain. Bathe in the grace. Own the fact. Never get beyond the fact of the gospel. That was your sin that put him there. Your sin that held him to the cross. Your sin that killed him. We never graduate from that truth. And it never stops amazing us. But then there's some tonight. You haven't yet gotten in the fountain. The guilt, you feel every bit of this. You feel the guilt of what's happened this last week. You feel the guilt of that one action that you hope nobody ever finds out, that thing you've tucked away, and you'd be mortified if anybody found out about that thing. You've deleted pictures, you've deleted emails, you've deleted text messages. You're trying to wash it all away because you're so ashamed and so embarrassed that somebody might find out. Can I just give you hope tonight? There's only one place that can actually wash that away. Yes, your sin was bad. Yes, it's horrific. But there's a fountain filled with blood drawn from Emmanuel's veins. And you can wash and be cleaned. That's what we want tonight for you. If you don't know Jesus, we want you to taste and see that he's good. We want your guilt and sin to be washed away from the Messiah that you murdered. Father God, I pray, Lord, that we never get to a point where our sin feels light, feels forgettable, feels like something we can just move beyond. I pray that our sin will always feel heavy to us because it cost the Son of God his life. And yet, Father, I pray tonight that for anyone who has yet to experience how sweet it is to be washed clean by the fountain Jesus opened up, that you will help them do that. Help them bask in the fact that the wages of sin is death, but the free gift of Jesus is a flowing fountain, free to all who come. I just want to give you some time to think. Tonight we get to partake in something we call the Lord's Supper. It's for those who have a relationship with Jesus. It's for those who are in a right relationship with Jesus. And for those that are in a right relationship with Jesus, it's for you to celebrate. You know, back in the day when God commanded the Passover to be taken, he commanded the Jews to eat the Passover lamb as a symbol and sign that they were acknowledging and accepting that this lamb had died for them and because of them. And then a Passover, a couple thousand years ago, Jesus took the bread and he broke it. He said, "This is my body broken for you." And he took the blood and the wine and he said, "This is my blood spilt for you. It's the blood of the new covenant." And he told us to take it and he told us to eat it, because in that eating action, what we're doing is we're taking ownership of, it was because of me. It was me who broke his body. It was me who spilled his blood. And in taking that, we receive and celebrate that his death has brought us life. Jesus, be big as you meet with your people and as we worship you tonight.